Hi, I'm Franklin, and this is Law School Strategy, How I Graduated from Law School with a Job. How I Graduated from Law School is a series of interviews with practicing attorneys and legal professionals to find out more about their career journey. The purpose is for you to hear about how other legal professionals became employed and started their career following law school. This is how they relaunched their career at a later stage in their professional life. It's not just young lawyers that we'll be talking with, but attorneys across all levels of experience and practice areas. The purpose isn't to try and prove the legal job market is perfect, because it's not, or convince you it's easy to get a job and there are tons of jobs out there, because there aren't. However, I do hope you gain some insights, ideas, tips, or other pieces of advice that can help you in your law school strategy. Because I do believe that if you work hard, follow the advice we share, you'll be closer than ever to graduating from law school with a job. On this episode, we have attorney Francine Ward from the San Francisco area in California. Hey, Francine.
Hey, Franklin. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks so much for coming on. I'll go ahead and kick it off with the first question. So what did you do or study before law school? And then why did you go to law school?
What did I do and study before? So what I studied in college was political science, and communications was my minor. And I must tell you, and often when law students talk to me today about that, I tell them, had I been able to do it again, I would do it differently, for sure. Yeah, I would probably take a science-based course or a mathematics, at least as either a minor or a major, because I just think for lawyers, the ability to think, think yourself out of a box, so to speak, is so important. So that's what I would do. But yeah, political poli-sci and communications. Yeah.
Great. So why did you go to law school?
Mine was a very unconventional road to law school, and so my reasoning behind it was also probably unconventional. I used to tell people that I went to law school because I wanted to save the world. I grew up at a time when Perry Mason was the big lawyer, way before Matlock and everyone else, or Law and Order. But the truth is, I was at a stage in my life where I needed to prove something. And so being a Black female, I really, really needed to prove that I had a brain. And so that was, if the truth be known, that was it. Education, I discovered, was important. And proving that I had something up here was critical. Yeah.
Great. And so where did you go to law school?
I went to Georgetown, and I love Georgetown in D.C. I'm one of those lawyers that actually love law school. And maybe it's because I went back later. I was much older when I went to law school, and I actually did it on my own. So I had a very deep appreciation for that whole process. Yeah.
Definitely. So was there a reason why you chose Georgetown for your law school experience?
Yeah, and this is another silly response, but it's the truth. So I was older, and I was living in New York, which is where I'm from. And I had gotten accepted to a couple of really good schools. Columbia was one, Georgetown was another one, and then some other schools. And I could have stayed in New York and gone to Columbia, but in my mind, I really wanted an Andy Hardy experience. Now, I don't know if your audience is going to know what Andy Hardy is, so I'm really dating myself. But it was like I wanted the experience of going away to school. That was really it. I wanted to go away to a campus, and me not doing all the research that I was supposed to, perhaps, I thought the law school was on the main campus. And the law school was, the main campus is wonderful. It's like your typical college campus, but the law school, in fact, was in a different location. So I was a little disappointed when I got there, but I really thought I was going away to school. That was the issue.
Okay, so explain Andy Hardy, if you would.
Okay, so, oh my God, this is so old. So Andy Hardy, Mickey Rooney, years ago, when he was young, he did this series of movies called the Andy Hardy series. And it was him and Judy Garland. We're talking about, I'm thinking it was 30s or 40s, because he was young. But as a kid, I grew up watching TV, and, I learned so much from television. And I loved Andy Hardy. So, yeah. You can look him up on Google. There you go.
Yeah, I'm sure there's some clips on YouTube or something.
Oh yeah.
So what was your law school experience like? Can you explain what it was like being a law student? What did you study? Were there any particular courses you enjoyed more than others?
law school was hard. I will say that. I did well in undergrad, but law school was a whole different experience. I was not as prepared for the experience as I had hoped I would be. I got through it. It was hard to get into Georgetown, and it was even harder to get out of there. That's the way I like to put it. Oh my God. But there were some classes that I really loved. I loved the process of learning. Even today, my favorite professors were probably the ones that presented the most difficult experiences for me. Like my property professor, I absolutely loved. And he was the first one that embarrassed me, so to speak. They did the Socratic method. I don't know if they did that.
It's hard to forget your first one, isn't it? When they do
God.
that to you.
Oh my God. Standing up in front of all these people being grilled. And Georgetown at the time, I think Harvard was the only law school that was larger than mine. We had 600 students in the law school the year I went in 1980.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it was pretty big. And we had 5 sections. There were 4 in the day and 1 in the evening. And I was in a day section, section 4, I remember. And we had 150 people. So imagine having to stand up and be grilled on a property case. And I remember almost like it was yesterday. It was an easement case. It was so frightening. But I loved the process of it. Eventually, after I got over oh my God, I hate this, I loved contracts. I really enjoyed, I liked tax. I thought I was going to be a tax lawyer until I joined the ABA as a law student. I went to my first tax section event, and then I never wanted to go back again.
Well, I definitely want to touch back on. I want to touch back on your ABA involvement, so that'll definitely be something we talk about a little bit later. But first, let's get to the question that everybody wants to know: did you graduate from law school with a job, and if so, how did you do it?
Okay, so I did not graduate from law school with a job, and here again, I'm one of those lawyers and one of those people in life. I'm really a big believer in telling the truth, because you can have lots of people tell you something and gloss all over the facts. But here's the truth as I believe it today. I did not graduate with a job, and much of it was my fault. Now, there were other factors that played into it without question. Me not passing the bar the first time, but here's what happened. I had a great summer associate position at a firm in New York called Schulte Raw and Zabel. And it was really a great opportunity. And it was in a location where I wanted to be in the city. It was a wonderful firm. But being an older student, on some level, I know today as I look back, it's one of the things that I regret. I had a chip on my shoulder. And I even tell law students today when they come to me and want to ask me questions, I tell them, the world doesn't owe you anything. You may think it does, you may think it should, but the truth is it doesn't. And when you come to the table with I don't want to say it's a disability, but when you come to the table with a couple of strikes, if you will, against you, for starters, as a female and as a Black female, and then you make it more difficult for yourself by having a chip on your shoulder, it's like, you know what? You're going to have some problems. And it's only today in retrospect that I can tell you in all honesty, that piece was my fault. Here's, as I recall, because I was older and because I was also, my lifestyle was very different than a lot of the young lawyers that were coming in. I don't drink. I don't use drugs. I'm not a big partier anymore. So when I went to law school, I wasn't doing the same thing that all the other kids who were my summer associate companions. They'd go hang out at night and drink with the partners. And, that's not what I wanted to do. Now, I could have probably handled it a little differently. I could have probably gone out on occasion and just had my Diet Coke or my club soda, but instead, I just didn't want to go. And you know what? At some point, you have to play the game to some extent. To some extent, you don't sacrifice your values, but if you're looking for the job or you're new to a job, on some level, you have to know what your limits are. I kind of liken it to politicians that go to Washington and they have really lofty goals, and many of them are wonderful, and they get to DC and they understand it's a good old boy network, whether you want to believe it or not. And so, on some level, they have to play the game in order to get things done. So it's the same thing. I realized that was on me, and I would do it a little differently. But yeah, that was it. So what happened is, because I didn't have a job in the beginning, I had to work a little harder. And this is the other thing I probably would tell to students. The work is really on you. Again, I cannot repeat enough. Nobody's going to hand you anything unless you're or your mommy is somebody so rich and famous and influential. And unless you have a trust fund, if you don't have those things and you come to the table with an attitude, you're going to have a problem. So, I eventually found a job. I was very fortunate because I'm a hard worker too. And I got with a firm. It was a spin-off firm of a big firm in New York. The big firm was White and Case. The spin-off firm that I was with was a firm called Kavanaugh, Peters, Palanos, NATO. And I don't think they're around anymore, like many of the firms that were around when I came out of law school. But I got a great opportunity with them, and I was with them until I moved to California. But again,
so how did you get that opportunity to get with that firm then?
So what I did have going for me was my willingness. I had a network of friends, number one, or acquaintances through my circles, through a variety of circles. And so I let people know that I needed a job. I wasn't bashful about that. We didn't have the internet when I was, back in the day. I had just learned how to use the computer and use WordPerfect, let alone anything else. So I had to really, I beat the bricks. I got a list first of the law firms in the area that I was interested in, the ones that I thought I could probably get into. And then I just started sending resumes. I talked to people I knew who might know someone or who might have been in that firm. I mean, it started with me, again, making a list of the firms that I was interested in. I also, what I did was I put out some informational queries, if you will. After I did my list, and again, that was part of my homework. After I did my list, I found out who the appropriate person was. And when someone was willing to talk to me, here's the thing that is so key. And thank God I had someone to mentor me in this regard. I made sure I was prepared when I went to the meeting or prepared for the phone call, and I made sure I was on time and showed up. I can't tell you, Franklin, how often I've had students want to talk to me. I've been willing to schedule an appointment. They either were late or didn't show up. And I have to tell you, when they finally did, if they did, I wouldn't talk to them. Because that, to me, is critical. If you're in a position where you're looking for a job, you're looking for work, and you can't even show up and be respectful of the person that's giving you the time, then something's wrong. And so I knew that beforehand. Thank God I knew that, because, I might have had even more problems. The other thing for me is I had someone who was willing to pull my covers and tell me how inappropriate that behavior was at the firm before. Where I had an attitude thinking I was better than people. I'm the one looking for a job, but I thought I was better than them. So I had someone who was willing to tell me the truth on that, and I didn't want to hear it, but it was right. They were correct, and I changed it. Yeah.
So that was after you were taking the New York bar, you made the connections through mutual friends and your circles you had, basically. And then at that point, you're able to take the lessons you had learned previously, and then that helped propel you to be ready essentially for this next position, this firm job. Is that correct?
Yes. Yeah. And let me step back. You mentioned, about taking the New York bar. I know a lot of lawyers don't talk about it, but I am very willing to talk about part of the struggle for me was that I had failed the bar. I am now admitted to 3 bars, the most difficult in the country, New York and California, and I'm admitted to the DC bar. New York is my first. I have been practicing for 26 years. It was January 1991 when I was admitted to the New York bar.
You'll never forget that date, will you?
Well, I sure will not. Believe me. Well, number one, it's 2 days before my birthday. Yesterday was my birthday. So I was admitted
Happy birthday.
thank you. I was admitted to the bar 2 days before my birthday, so I won't forget it. But I also won't forget it because John F. Kennedy Jr. and I failed the bar at the same time twice, and we passed on the same day. We were confirmed on the same day, and we went before. Well, we were confirmed on the same day, and we also went before the character committee on the same day. So it stands out.
That's
in my mind.
amazing.
Oh, for sure. The only problem is his poor face was splattered all over the New York Times and the Daily News. Mine wasn't.
Well, I think it still is, along with there is a whole listing. I think it's BuzzFeed actually, who has a complete listing of celebrities or well-known individuals, public figures that have failed the bar at least once or twice or sometimes 3 times. And I think every single law student is looking at that just for some type of comfort as they're going through the bar exam process, because it's such a grueling and intense process. So.
Well, let me give them a little bit more comfort. So I failed the New York bar twice, and I passed on my 3rd try. And so I was admitted in 91. California, now one would have thought, having failed the exam, New York, I would know how to take a test. Well, I ended up, and I'm just telling you right now, I stopped counting how many times I failed the California bar at 6. I stopped counting. So I don't even know how many times I actually failed it, but what I do know, and this is what I want to say to anyone who's listening to this, who's maybe failed the exam once or twice or more, and is really feeling what one would rightfully feel when that happens. I mean, I can't even describe it. Only if you've gone through it, you know the feeling of dejection. You know the feeling of feeling like somebody's just ripped something from your insides, and you feel like the worst day of your life, and you feel like a piece of garbage. That's the bottom line. I can say this. It's not the end of the world. You will not die. But I know for myself what I had to do after failing the bar. I had to stop and reassess my situation, because I kept going back to the empty well, and I was studying. I mean, I was already a lawyer by that time. I'd gone through the New York bar. I was already practicing law. But what I discovered is you really, the more you fail or the more you get beat down, the more there's a piece of you that's missing. Your mind is not really focused on, your mind is too focused on passing rather than focusing on the little details of what you need to do to pass. And so I was so busy focused on just the substantive law. And the reality is, when I finally passed California, I had created a plan, and I had actually stepped back for like 6 months and cleared my plate, which was one of the big things I had to do. I planned it out for 6 months, but what I put into that plan was not just redoing this, reading the substantive material again, doing essays. In California, I didn't have to take the MBA because I was already a lawyer, so I had to take 2 days instead of 3. Not just reviewing my essays, but I also had to add something that focused on my mind and my emotions and my physical condition. I had to place on my schedule exercise. I had to, at that time, The Secret was big, and so I put on my calendar every Saturday before I was working through my practicals. I put in Listen to The Secret. I did meditation, but I added that into the mix, which, is an interesting thing to say, but it's what worked for me, because I was so intent on passing. I was so tense. I needed to calm down, because I realized when I was in the test, the times I failed it, what would happen is every time I got to a question and I felt stumped, I would sit there and sit there and sit there, and before I knew it, the hour allotted for that essay was gone, and here I was, And I mean, it's timed, and if you miss that, then you've already missed a good portion. So what I did this time was, because of the meditation and the emotional massaging, if you will, of myself, what I did is whenever I got to a place where I felt stumped, I just pushed through it. I just did a quick, okay, Francine, you know this, you've done it, you've gone over it over and over again, move on. And I was able to get through it by focusing on that as well, because I knew the work. Like I said, I've already been practicing. I knew the substantive material. I needed to calm myself down when I was freaking out. So I say to you, if somebody that's listening, I'd be happy to talk to someone if they're struggling through that, if they need to be reminded of what to do. And it's not the end of the world. You will get through it. You just have to maybe step back and reassess where you are.
Yeah, speaking to that kind of, I think I did Barbary. That was one of the resources available to me when I graduated. And so I utilized that. And I remember specifically they had a mental health like videos that you could watch, and like everything about overcoming the mental challenges of like what you just described, of like calming yourself and prepping your mind going into it, because that's such a huge aspect of it. So I don't want this to turn into a Barbary ad because I don't get any support from them. But I was just going to ask you, I'm sure people listening would wonder, what were some of the steps that you had taken to prepare for the bar? Or did you do a bar review program? Did you do it on your own, self-paced? What would that look like for you?
So because I had taken the exam many, many times, I had invested tons, thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars on courses.
Sure.
Not necessarily Barbary, but many, many, many courses. So what I did, finally, I realized I already knew the substantive material, and I had books. I already had the books. So what I needed to do is reassess the way I was approaching my study. So like I said, the very first thing I had to do, because I was busy working, I was, traveling around the country doing motivational talks, I had to really give myself an allotment of time where I was only focused on the bar. So what I did was cleared my calendar. I remember I decided to take the July exam that year, and I cleared my calendar from January until July. And then I got a calendar. Literally, I got a calendar, and I planned it out literally every day. So I gave myself like a month and a half to kind of just breeze through the substantive content. And so that's what I did. Like, it might have been 3 days reading the material for contracts, 4 days for property, whatever it was. I fit I think we had 13 or 14 courses, because California has its own as well. So I put everything on the calendar. And then the rest of the time, what I did, I allotted, I think it was maybe 4 months or 3, I don't know, whatever it was. I then put down how many days I was going to work on my essays. I focused on essays during the week, and on the weekends, on Saturday and Sunday, I did 2 practicals a day. And practicals are 3 hours each. So what I did, like the first week after I read my substantive material, I allotted, let's say, and I can't remember exactly right now, but this is generally the way I did it. I had the list of the subjects, and let's say I allotted, well, actually, I probably did it for a whole week because I gave myself plenty of time. So let's say that first week, I did nothing but essays on contracts. That's all I did. And I might have done maybe 3 or 4 or 5, but nothing but essays on that day. And then what I did was I literally reviewed the answers. Even if I got them right, I wanted to review the answers in the book so it could still be reinforced in my brain. So I did the essay, I wrote it out, then I read through the answers, and I did that with, it was maybe 3, 4, or 5 a day. I did that for every single subject. So by the time I was finished with the subjects, I had gone through every essay I could find anywhere. I used the old books, like the Barbary, I had all kinds of books I used. And I just used any essay book I could find, and I just did them all. And then the same thing with the practicals. On the weekend, I did 2. And I went through the answers. By the time I was ready to do this, I was really ready. I was really ready. And then, like I said, I added at the beginning on Saturday, I listened to something positive, like The Secret or something that got me into the right mood. On Sundays, I usually gave myself a massage, got myself a massage. And then what I did differently also is toward the end, I gave myself, I think I was finished with everything about 3 weeks before. So like by the beginning of July, I had been finished. And so then what I did was the next 2 weeks, I just reviewed everything. I just went over essays again. I went over the practicals, even the ones I had done. I just reviewed them so it was still in my brain. I stopped, which was really something I did differently. Instead of studying right up until the moment I went into the test, which was crazy, I stopped. The test was Tuesday and Thursday because I didn't have to take the Wednesday MBE. So on Sunday, I did a massage. Monday, I did nothing. I did no more studying after that. On Tuesday morning, I got there early, really early. Number one, I wanted to make sure I got a parking spot and I didn't feel stressed. I made sure I got there early so I wouldn't be, I wouldn't feel stressed. But what I also did is I didn't allow myself to talk to a lot of people either before, during, or after the exam. Because what I found is that, when you talk about it, somebody is saying something, and then I'm thinking, oh my God, I didn't do it right. And, I mean, really, you might as well take a gun and shoot yourself if you start connecting with people during the exam because you're going to go crazy. So this time I didn't. I just did everything differently. And I was really calm. I'll tell you, that was the key. Because of the mental part and the emotional part, I went in really with a different attitude. I was so much more relaxed. I went and got a seat to myself, and, I was able to get through it. But that was my process. I'm a planner. Lots of people plan, some don't. I am a planner. I find even in my work, I plan everything out. I'm very left brain in that regard.
Well, thank you so much for, first of all, sharing that experience, and then also being willing to just share the fact that you took so many tries and you just kept at it. And the failure aspect of the bar exam is what most people are so afraid to admit. And it's just thank you for sharing that. I know it'll be very helpful for law students to hear that, and for recent grads that are going through that process right now that have failed, to hear that and to know that it is possible to just not give up. So let's go back to your job. So I know that you, spoiler alert, you have your own law firm now. So what was that like in terms of the transition out of the firm life with multiple partners to having your own practice?
And first, let me just say I'm actually of counsel of a law firm now. So I have my practice, but I'm of counsel. But we can get back into that.
Okay, well, great. I didn't spoil everything. So,
but it's challenging because when you are going to go on your own. Now, some people end up going because they have to. Some people choose to. In my case, I chose to leave the firm and move to California. And it's hard either way, though. Let me tell you, it's hard because when you're working for yourself, that means you are responsible for making the money, bringing in the clients, doing everything. And so what I often say to people is, I believe there are two types of lawyers. There is the employee type lawyer and the entrepreneur. I am an entrepreneur, and that is really what has helped me succeed being on my own. Because I've met many lawyers who don't succeed on their own. They struggle tremendously. And I think that's because they're always waiting for the job. They're always waiting for somebody to bring it to them, as opposed to being willing to get out there and go make it happen. I mean, that's the difference between an employee and an entrepreneur. An employee has a job, and if they get fired, they're trying to find another job, and they're unhappy until they find that job. And an entrepreneur is going to say, okay, I don't have a job, now let me go make my own. And that was me, so I was able to do that. Again, I had resources in terms of a community of people because of my life, because of my lifestyle. I knew a lot of people, and I just started letting people know, but it's hard. Either way, it's still very difficult because for me, it was also difficult at that time. That was when we started to get into computers and email. In fact, email, I learned how to do that I'm thinking it was like, it's late, you'll laugh because you probably grew up with computers, but it was like 94, 95 or something. I mean, it was late. It was late, but most people didn't know how to do it then. It was just kind of, we were still using, what is it? I can't even remember, it so long ago. But
I remember we had Prodigy in my house when I was growing up. My parents had Prodigy, and they had some type of email function on that, but nothing like it is today, obviously.
nothing. So I had to learn all of that, plus try to figure out how to earn a living. So it was very challenging for me. I think one thing that law students and young lawyers have, they have an advantage today because technology literally makes everything just so much easier. It comes with its own complications, but even just the fact that we're doing this right now, I mean, who would have thought? We would have never had anything like this when I was in school. So it was a challenge for me, you know, trying to get a practice started and learn the new technology. But I will say what works in my favor is I am an entrepreneur and I'm willing to learn. I took all kinds of courses. I mean, I'm one of, like you, I'm one of the few lawyers that we know that's really into social media. I mean, I built up a presence. I got on Twitter in 2008, and I think last I looked at my law Twitter page, I have like 19,000 followers, you know, because I'm active on it. You know, I've been willing to learn things. And so I think if I had to suggest something to a young lawyer in terms of advice, I'd say don't be afraid to learn. You know, don't think you know everything. Be willing to learn different things and from different people. Yeah.
I agree. I think that's very important. I think what you touched on technology wise, we basically have no excuse these days because you have all the education you could ever want, continued learning that you could ever want after law school. You can continue learning through stuff like Lynda or massive open online courses, all of those types of things that are available, and you can just, the possibilities are endless in what you can learn. So getting back to your practice and kind of explain, did any of this that you've touched on, all these abilities to adapt and be active in bar associations, did that impact your job search and your ability to get the position like you have now where you're of counsel?
Absolutely, absolutely. You know, again, and I've kind of interspersed a number of pieces of advice I would offer to young lawyers. One of the most important things, and I will say it until my dying day, get involved with a bar association. I happen to really love the ABA, but I'm also active in the California State Bar. But most of my work is through the ABA. You know, I've come up through the ranks. And actually next year or the next ABA year, I'll be on council for the IP section. I started I think my first, one of my first real committees, I got on a committee that doesn't even exist anymore, but I got on it. And the person who was chairing had asked he said, would you be willing to do whatever it was he asked me to do? And I said, yes. I said, yes. And so I think getting involved in the ABA has been really one of the best things that's happened for me. Number one, it keeps me in touch with things that are going on in my profession that I might not learn otherwise, you know, because I'm around other lawyers that are doing these things. I go to all of the IP conferences. I usually speak. This year I'm not, but I generally speak at them. I go to the different meetings. I'm on committees. I'm active. So that's definitely been something that's helped me, not only in terms of learning, but meeting other lawyers and allowing people to get to know who I am. And I believe that people give business or make referrals to people they like. And so if you're surrounded by people and you're showing up and you are someone they like, potentially, you know, you might be referred. And if not, even still, people are paying attention. They're paying attention.
So true.
Yeah, the ABA, and if there's a student that would prefer not to get involved with the ABA, find your local bar association. You know, I'm sure there are lots of opportunities, but the idea is to get involved, network, do like you did. I mean, you are so amazing in that you jumped right in the middle, you got involved, and I'm watching you as one of our future leaders in the IP section. of the
And
ABA.
I feel like people, like law students especially, need to understand how easy it is to just show up and get involved. Like that's really all it takes. And I think I love that show up work, that show up word that you just used, that phrase. It's exactly what you have to do. So I'm going to go back to something you said a little bit earlier on in the conversation for my last question. My last question, as I shared with you, is what advice you would share to law students or recent graduates. But I want to go back to something you said about how you used to have a chip on your shoulder in law school, and you had all these other varying characteristics that other law students might have, whether it's you're Black or you're Hispanic or you're female or any other type of diverse background that you have. Um, what answer would you give to them if they are listening and they realize, oh, what she described is exactly what I've been struggling with, and I need to get over that. What would you tell yourself, and what would you share with somebody else going through that same type of struggle right now?
I'd say the feelings are real, and there's no denying that we live in a culture where race matters, gender matters, sexual orientation matters, disability matters. Yes, they do. And you got to get over it, at least to the extent that you want to function in this world, in this profession. There are things that you can do and there are avenues you can take once you're in, that you can help try to move those things along. But the reality is, you just have to get over it and get yourself in the door. That's what I say. Because I've had many, many students come to me talking about that. And I get it. Again, I'm there. I've been there. I know what that's like. And even today, I understand what it's like and even as an IP lawyer, when I go to ABA meetings, most of the room consists of white men, white heterosexual men at that. So I do understand. And I could not afford to let that get in my way. So I think do good work, learn, don't expect the world's going to hand you something. You may have to work a little harder. Okay. Maybe it's not fair, but so what? And just do it. Just do what you need to do. Find someone that you can talk to. I would do that. But and let me just add this, because I got some feedback once, and it really speaks to this very issue about having a chip on your shoulder. I remember once when I was looking for work and I couldn't find work. This is after I left New York and came to California. I failed the California bar. I couldn't get through the bar. So employers were saying I was either overqualified because I was a New York lawyer, but I wasn't admitted to the California bar, or I was underqualified. So, I was really caught between a rock and a hard place. And after a while, I was so weary. I'd go on interviews and I just, it was horrible. And so what would happen is I would complain about the last job I had or the person who didn't want to hire me, and I'd complain who I'm sitting in front of. And I remember, and it was a big law firm. It was an old white shoe law firm. So it was a really high-end firm. And I remember the guy, and you know what? I'm grateful to him today. I didn't like it when he told me, but I realized how grateful I am because he had the courage to tell me what maybe some other people were thinking, but would not have said to me. And he said, Francine, I could see that you've got lots of potential, and I could see that you've had a really tough time. But he said, you should never come into an interview bad-mouthing the people that you either worked for before or the people who didn't hire you. He said, that is the first thing, and me as an interviewer, I'm listening to that, and I'm not going to hire you. He said, you just don't do that. He said, and the other thing is, I know how it feels that, you've been looking and looking and you haven't gotten a job, but he said, you seem desperate. And nobody's going to hire somebody who's desperate. Boy, I have to tell you, Franklin, those were two pieces of advice I got that I didn't like in the moment, but wow, they have so served me the rest of my life. Even if I'm trying to get a client now or something, I'm very mindful. And so I tell to law students, don't be desperate. Don't be, even if you feel it, put on your big girl panties or your big boy pants. And when you're in that room interviewing, you don't be desperate and you don't badmouth anybody you worked for before or who didn't hire you. So I would definitely say that, because that was part of the chip on my shoulder. I was mad, I was angry, and still, you don't do that, because who wants to hire someone like that? Nobody. It's bad enough employers have to deal with employees today that badmouth them and they have to keep them. So
that is so true. Very true. Thank you so much for sharing that advice. And I think I'm going to wrap it up here unless you have anything else that you'd like to share.
Thank you. This was wonderful.
Thank you so much, Francine. I really appreciate you taking the time to talk, today, and also sharing just amazing insights and experiences that you've had. It's definitely very valuable lessons. So what is the best way for people to reach out to you if they have any additional questions or want to follow up with you?
Well, they can reach me through some social media venue. I'm
Take your pick.
Take advantage of that, social media, Facebook, or they can email me at info@fwardattorney.com. So that's info@info at F as in Frank, WARDATTORNEY.com. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, and I'll also include a link to that in the show notes on podcast app, and then also in the YouTube link description below. So, well, great. Thank you. And thank you, everybody, for watching and listening. Make sure you subscribe. We are now on all the podcast apps, so pick your favorite and download us and give us a review. Thank you, and also check out for future episodes of How I Graduated from Law School with a Job. Until next time.